Aaron Jones sure looked good though.
Oh, God, I benched him for Ty Montgomery in like 3 spots. I'm so mad about it. I thought, another week healthy. He's going to be healthier. He'll be back. They want the more experienced guy with the rookie quarterback. God.
I have the combo in 2 leagues, and I started both of them in one. But the part of that was because I didn't have a lot of other options, and I went with Montgomery in the other one. So that's all right. Now you know. It feels like you know now.
I did buy Hundley in a spot this morning though, like half an hour before kickoff.
What'd you pay?
I sent my, which I'm really bad about doing, but I sent my 2019 first for Hundley and James White. In a league I lost Rodgers.
Has to be a contender.
That I'm like 4-2 on, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I don't hate that. You went 2 years in the future. Wow.
Yeah, I don't have an 18 first.
We'll talk about Rodgers a little bit, when we're down there as well, and how that's affected trade discussions in a lot of leagues. Man, people are talking about Rodgers, and it seems like
I tried to buy him.
Owners in Superflex leagues that lost Rodgers got crazy trading for a replacement.
I really tried to. Eric Bursloff in KS4 was trying to come after Alex Smith or Ben Roethlisberger. I was really hoping I'd sell one of them to either Ryan, who lost Palmer today, or Eric. But he wanted to, like I told you, he wanted to sell me, send me Jared, what's his name, Jimmy Garoppolo in a second for Smith, and I wasn't going to do that. So I was like, hey, maybe we could talk about Rodgers since you're competing. You're like the top team in the league, and you don't have Rodgers. Maybe you want to sell him to me, but he wouldn't.
It was a mistake by a lot. A lot of them I saw was like, wow, you're you lost a huge part of of the reason you're a contender.
Yeah.
Like, you're not just going to throw in this random quarterback. And a lot of them were for not great options. Like I saw McCown go for way too much in one league.
Did you see any of those on Trade Finder? Should we pull up 1 or 2 of those if we're going to talk about him?
Of the Rodgers ones?
Yeah.
Oh, we could.
I'll look real quick.
Okay. I actually have it pulled up right here. Let's see if there's any. What do you think of the Trade Finder?
I like it. It's fun.
Yeah,
I don't use it. I don't use it enough, but every time I think about using it, I'm like, oh yeah, this thing is awesome.
I do it now. I got addicted. I do it with every player that's offered to me or anything like that.
That's a good idea.
I immediately go there. Oh man, there's some.
You see this one, Rodgers
Holy crap.
Rodgers and OBJ for Mariota, Watkins in a first.
Oh my, yeah.
That's pretty. I mean, that's a 1 quarterback. But
how about the Rodgers for Breeze?
Yeah, I saw that one too.
3 seconds and a third.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That guy really needed a quarterback. That's a 12-team.
And it's a 1 quarterback.
1 quarterback.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's a crazy one. Rodgers and Duke Johnson for Luck in a first. Rodgers and Delvin Cook for Brady, Garoppolo, Lynch in a first. Ouch.
Here's a Rodgers for Brady in a first.
Remember that one. That's a good one to keep in mind.
I actually kind of don't hate that one. Like if I'm the best team in the league.
You see the Rodgers first and a third for Russell Wilson?
Yikes.
I'd gladly sell Wilson for that. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Even if that's the 12th pick.
Yeah.
Sign me up for that one.
All right.
Okay.
There's another Rodgers for Brady in a first. That seems like a popular one. Hogan in a first. What?
That seems kind of good. Like that seems like an even trade. The Rodgers for Brady in a first.
Yeah, I like it.
If you're in 10th place and you have Brady, that is a nice turnaround. That's a great turnaround.
Yeah.
And if you're in first place and lost Rodgers, sure.
Yeah.
I'll take Brady. Hell yeah, I need him.
Yeah. Number 24 is Rodgers for Hogan in a first.
Oh man, and I like going and getting Hogan right now. But
for that. All right. Anyway.
Okay.
I'm pretty excited about this night game too. So let's knock this up.
Yeah, me too. Dude, I am 6-1. I'm going to end up being 6-1 Scott Fishbowl. and I'm 12th in scoring.
Wow.
12th in scoring in my league.
Nice work.
Better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, I
have played the 12th highest scoring team 3 of the first 6 weeks.
I won the division last year, but yeah, I'm not doing so hot this year.
Yeah, I took your
did you see us?
That was a mistake, bro.
Whatever, he's getting the volume.
The volume is the kind of volume when you're a dad in your 50s and your son is listening to music that you don't approve of. That kind of volume. Shitty volume.
Yeah. Did you see in the staff league, though? Well, I don't know what's happening so far today, but we were both 6-0 entering this week in opposite
I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold on this week. I got crushed by buys in 1 week.
I'm playing the other 6-0 team, who I don't even know who it is. Go Team Go, whoever that is.
Yeah, who cares, right?
Yeah.
I'm in first. I don't care who the rest of the guys are.
Right.
All right, you ready to record?
Yeah, let's do it.
3, 2, 1, record.
Rolling.
And sorry to our buddy Erin for having to listen to those 15 minutes of junk if she's using the backup. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Week 7 edition of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. Once again, we are recording on Sunday night. The Patriots and Falcons are about to kick off the rematch of last year's Super Bowl. And I have my good buddy Matt Price with me. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. It's kind of a crazy week in a lot of aspects, so I'm excited to dig into this.
Yeah, I was excited, Matt, that we did, and the weekend's not over, and there's a lot of stars still to play in these last 2 games of Week 7. But we don't have that heavy heart tonight as we start the recording of, we just lost OBJ. Oh no, we lost Aaron Rodgers. Let's hope that streak continues for these last couple games of the week. There were some really interesting performances, though, some big games from some big names and also some duds. And as we have all year, we'll talk about all of that. Let's start at the quarterback position this week, Matt. Jameis Winston, I wasn't really expecting a big game from him going against that Buffalo secondary and that Buffalo pass rush. In Buffalo, quite impressive, though. 32 of 44, 382 yards. He threw 3 touchdowns and just 1 pick. He seems a little bit inconsistent from week to week, Matt. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Jameis. I saw an interesting trade, or a friend of mine asked me about an interesting trade offer. Trade Jameis Winston, fringe playoff team, trade away Jameis for Aaron Rodgers in a super flex. What are your thoughts on Jameis? I told him I really like having Aaron Rodgers. I really like being that 6th team in the playoffs, though, as well. What are your thoughts on the trade and Jameis in general?
In terms of the trade, I don't. If I'm a contender, I would have a hard time doing it. I definitely want Rodgers over Jameis, but I'm like you. I want that last playoff spot and that shot at the title. So, in general, though, I would say that I would do that. Like if it was the opposite, and I was if I was a rebuilder, even though Rodgers is much older, I wouldn't mind moving Jameis for Rodgers at all. So sure. I would definitely go the other direction. But I've had a love-hate with Winston this season. I cannot figure out the best week to start him, because every week I start the other guy that I have. Like I have him and Tyrod in a ton of places. I started Tyrod today, which he did fine, but he didn't do as well as Jameis. So I agree with you at the inconsistency, but I mean the talent, all the talent in the world is there. The offense is still really good on paper. I just think that team needs a little bit more time to gel. Maybe a new coach. I don't know. Cutter is kind of maybe wearing thin a little bit. Maybe they need some new play calling, some new blood on that side of the field. But I'm still a fan of Winston.
Perhaps I attribute it to that gunslinger mentality. He really likes to fire it into coverage from time to time. And I think that coaching staff tries to deflect some of that from time to time with the play calls. But it's such a roller coaster ride.
You know what he, and it was like that in college too. Like it seems like he has this habit of digging himself into a big hole, and then in the second half just coming out firing and ended up with like really nice stats, but putting his team in a difficult spot, and it's a lot harder to come back in the NFL, obviously. So
right,
that seems to have followed him.
completing 72% of his passes this week after a couple of dud weeks, and then the injury where he only completed around 50% of his passes. It's such a roller coaster, and it's impossible to predict when those big games are going to come. If I was a betting man, I'd say no way against that Buffalo defense.
Yeah.
And he ripped them. 384 and 3 touchdowns. That's a nice fantasy line for any quarterback. And I just didn't see it coming with the injury and that defense. So I'll continue. I guess we'll both continue to scratch our head when it comes to Winston. Another quarterback that put up a nice game in Week 7 was Matt Moore in relief of Jay Cutler. He completed 13 of 21 passes, come from behind win, 188 yards and 2 scores, also threw a pick. He looked pretty good. He could be that useful pickup right now in Superflex leagues. If Cutler misses times, it looks like that's possible. Perhaps some cracked ribs with the early reports. Matt, what do you think about picking up Matt Moore in Superflex and starting him, using him right away?
Yeah, I don't mind if you can get him off the waiver wire. I did see him pop off of a lot of waiver wires this last week. People, kind of jumping the gun early and maybe predicting a Cutler benching or something like that. But we got a little bit early with the injury here. In terms of like buying him for somebody that already has him, probably not, because I don't think I would want to pay more than like a third. And I think probably somebody who has Matt Moore now that knows that he's a starter, at least for now, probably going to want like a second. And I don't think I'm willing to pay that price. So if you can get him off the waiver wires, absolutely.
I watched a little bit of that game late, and I was pretty impressed. I know a lot of fans of the Dolphins have been clamoring for the change, and he certainly looked good. This seems like the situation where the coaching staff could do the whole, well, let's make, even if Cutler's ready or on the fringe of being ready, let's let him sit a week, see what we have with Matt Moore. And if Moore looks good, he could run with that job for sure.
We have seen this from Moore before, though,
right.
where he's looked good in a game or two, and then once defenses are like, okay, it's Matt Moore, they kind of figure him out. So I'm not super hopeful of his long-term outlook this season, but I think he could be usable at least next week.
Yeah, and I think in Superflex leagues, obviously we're just talking Superflex 2 quarterback. In 1 quarterback leagues, he's off the radar for sure. Moving to running back, one of the lone bright spots for our beloved Packers was tailback Aaron Jones, who went for 131 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries. He also caught 3 passes for 7 yards. Man, he looked like the clear number 1 tailback in Green Bay. Montgomery got just 4 carries and 1 catch. Is Aaron Jones an RB2 going forward? And are you buying or selling Jones as we move on through the season?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be one of those rare buy highs, and it might not even end up being a buy high, I think. I'm going to go ahead and buy him. It probably costs you at minimum like a early second right now, maybe even a late first at this point after two or three good games here over the last few weeks. So I would definitely go ahead and buy if I had the opportunity to do so. I don't think I would sell unless somebody's really just willing to pay more than a late first. If somebody's going to give me a mid first, I might think about it. But I'm still buying him. And it's going to be weird going forward if maybe just Ty Montgomery isn't completely healthy yet. Maybe those ribs are bothering him more than we think it is. I know myself, I benched Jones today for Montgomery in a couple of spots just because I thought he was going to reassume that role, another week post injury, another week more healthy, but it didn't happen. So I do think that he's played himself into some kind of timeshare at a minimum, even when Montgomery comes back. And I think it's possible that this carries over into 2018 with Aaron Jones as the lead back there.
I think you're right, and listeners should probably take this with a grain of salt because this is 2 Packers fans talking, obviously. Sure. But we do watch the team very closely, and he's so much more explosive than what we've seen from some of the other tailbacks that have gone through Green Bay. It seems like that coaching staff really likes him. As far as price, I think I can shed a little light on it. After his big game against Dallas, I offered for all 11 leagues where I didn't own him a second-round pick and got him in just 2 leagues for a second. One is a contract league. It's a kitchen sink league where it probably honestly is mid-second round, but does include some devies. And one is a true dynasty where I am a contender, so it would have ended up being late second. I sent out the same offer to the 9 other leagues again this week after his down game a week ago. Didn't get anything done there. Got a lot of talk going back and forth with owners, but it seems like Jones owners are looking for that mid-first value, and I wasn't really willing to go that high. I'm kind of questioning that at this point. He's one of those guys that if I'm out of it specifically and I'm holding on to a veteran, a guy in his late 20s that's putting up low RB1, high RB2 numbers, and I'm thinking about selling for a player rather than a draft pick, Aaron Jones is a guy that's pretty high on that list that I'd take as an even swap and turn it into the young guy with the upside in Green Bay. Let's talk about some of those veteran running backs that put up big games. We're going to start with Mark Ingram against those Packers. 22 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown, Matt. He also caught 4 passes for just 5 yards, but was involved there a little bit. The rookie was Kamara was everything in the passing game out of the backfield for the Saints and looked really good. But it was Ingram that grabbed my eye, Matt. Second straight 100-yard game since the Adrian Peterson trade. He looks like a mid RB1 to me, no matter what settings you're playing, whether it be standard or PPR. Are you buying or selling Ingram first, whether you're a contender? Are you going to buy him? He's the RB4 in the most recent, RB24 in the most recent ADP on DLF. If you're contending, that seems like a pretty easy price to pay if you need a running back.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying Mark Ingram. I've been a Ingram owner in many places, struggling through those first 3 or 4 years. He kind of feels like, do you remember watching cartoons when you were a kid and there was always the character that would pull out the flower who's in love with the other character and be like, she loves me not. She loves me not. It feels like Sean Payton finally loves Mark Ingram, So I love him, and I always have. On a contender, I'm definitely buying. I'm hoping I can get him for a late first. If I'm going to sell him, even on a rebuild, I don't think I would sell him because he's one of those players that always produces more than what his trade value is. Like, no one really wants to pay a first for Mark Ingram. I actually tried in a rebuild to sell him for a mid first and no taker. So I'm happy to hold him. He's going to be with the Saints at least one more year. He signed through 2018. So I know Kamara's role is going to keep growing, but I really think the two of them can coexist, and he's going to be that lead back for them for at least the next 2 years. So if I'm a contender, I'm absolutely buying. If I'm on a rebuilder, it'd be tough to sell, but it would take a mid first or better at this point for me to sell him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I would sell him for a late first at this point either. Unless
I think that I'm more than a year out. Like if I think I'm 2 or 3 years out, then I might consider it. So I guess it just
depends on the team. It feels like I'm waffling a little bit. You're never more than a year out, are you?
I'm not, but some people like that really extreme, more like double productive struggle where they punt years, not only year 1, but also year 2 and sometimes year 3. So,
right. And
there are some listeners out there.
You probably don't have Mark Ingram on your team in the first place. I was doing a little bit of looking on the DLF trade tool, and I seen him traded a couple times for a 2018 first. Now, we don't know where those are going to fall, but you assume they're mid to late. Also traded for a 2018 first and third. A first and second would probably do it if I was in a rebuild, or a first and a young player that I was excited about that isn't getting an opportunity yet. But I'm with you, Matt. Mark Ingram belongs in that mid RB1 conversation, and he's still young enough to do it for years as long as that coaching staff stays in love with Mark Ingram. Let's move on to LaShawn McCoy. 23 carries, 91 yards, 2 scores, also caught 5 passes for 31 yards. His first 2 touchdowns of the year came in week 7. He's averaging just 3.5 yards per carry on the year. I'm interested here, Matt. Are you buying or selling McCoy if you're a contender?
I kind of feel the same about McCoy as I do about Mark Ingram. Like, if I'm a contender, I think I'm still going to buy for a first, and I bet you I can get that if it's a team that's completely out of it. And if I'm a rebuild, I think I'm probably a little bit more likely to sell him than Ingram. I think is a year, maybe 2 older. So I guess I'd be a little bit more likely to buy him, but I still think he's going to be productive for at least another year. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff at all. He still looks great to me on the field, other than the yards per carry, which we could have a big discussion about that if we really wanted to. But I just think he's going to keep producing at least this year and next. So if I'm a contender, I can definitely buy there.
Yeah, I will too. He is the Buffalo Bills offense. Everything runs through him. They're so much better with him on the field, whether they're passing or running the ball. I once again, I looked at the trade tool with McCoy. I saw some interesting ones straight up for Devontae Adams. That was an interesting one for me. Also straight up for rookie Mike Williams which was a little bit of a head scratcher. You wonder where those two teams are. You imagine it's a 12th place and a first place team doing that swap and just wanting the youth and the young receiver with the upside, and then also traded for a first and a second in 2 separate leagues. That seems like the price I was seeing on that trade tool. If he's a first and a second and Ingram is just a first, a late first, I think I'm buying Ingram because he has a little bit more, like you were saying, Matt, a little more tread left on the tires perhaps. Let's move to another group of the elite group of running backs. Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, they all lit it up in week 7, all had over 100 yards, all with well over 20 touches in their respective ball games. It seemed like it was the week of the elite running back. You could probably throw McCoy and Ingram into this conversation as well. Matt, the reason I wanted to talk about these guys, and usually we don't try to talk about all the top names. We try to sprinkle them in. It's just because I want to know who's that elite tier of running back for you as a dynasty owner. How many are in it, and who's the last guy in and the first guy out of that elite tier for you among running backs?
Man, that's tough. It's definitely those 3 you just mentioned: Bell, Elliott, and Gurley, and I think you still have to include David Johnson there. I feel like I want to put Bell at the end of that tier, and that's probably
consistent with what you've been talking about for months, really.
I don't know. I mean, if I'm a contender, don't get me wrong, I want all of the Le'Veon Bell right now. I mean, they are giving him everything he can handle and more. It's 30 carries, I think, for the 30 plus carries for the 3rd week in a row, I think. So I just continue to worry about his injury history, and the fact that I don't really think that he's going to be in Pittsburgh again next season. So unless I'm a contender, I think he's probably at the end of that tier for me. But I still have Melvin Gordon up there. On the blueprint this past week, they talked about how maybe there's just this giant first tier now instead of a big elite tier, which I think is probably closer to right, because I think Freeman is still up there too. And I think some people would have Howard up towards that end too after his big game today, and he's produced a lot better this season than I thought he would behind a team that isn't necessarily going to compete this season. And I don't like to buy running backs on bad teams, but he's continuing to produce even despite the fact that Tariq Cohen has emerged. So I just think that there's this big group at the top there. But among those top 4 guys, I think Bell is probably at the end for me. But it's such a razor hair thin kind of argument,
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the conversation that was on the Dynasty Blueprint, because that's kind of what brought the question on for me, as well as these big games by these top guys this week. It seems to me like Johnson still belongs in the conversation. Obviously, it's just an injury that is keeping him from putting up big numbers. And then Fournette and Hunt belong in the conversation. I still think Melvin Gordon's right around there. Delvin Cook for me is really close as well. Seems like Freeman should be at least talked about, but outside of those, I really feel like it's those top 4 of Bell, Elliott, Johnson, and Gurley, and then there's another tier of about 4 with the other guys, but we might be splitting hairs. Like you said, the last running back I wanted to talk about today is TJ Yeldon, which is kind of a curious one considering he didn't even get a carry in the first 6 weeks of the regular season. He goes for 9 and 122 with a touchdown this week. With Fournette sidelined with the injury, he outplayed Chris Ivory, who had 18 carries and 47 yards, a touchdown and a fumble lost against the Colts this week. He's available in most of the leagues that I play in, and I play in a lot of deep ones, Matt. I'm sure dynasty owners everywhere are seeing TJ Yeldon on the waiver wire. What are you doing with him? Are you picking him up? And how much of that fab money or your available assets are you willing to give up to add Yeldon in case this injury to Fournette is long-term?
I mean, I guess if he's on the wire, I would spend some money on him if I need a running back. But honestly, I'm not really buying into this. It feels like a fluky kind of game to me. I don't think that, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know, but I don't think that Fournette's going to be missing an exorbitant amount of time. I know Ivory fumbled today, but he's looked good in past weeks. The Colts, according to 444's schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed for defense, are the 31st worst team against running backs. So I just think there's a lot of things here that kind of point to a fluke. If you don't mind though, Dan, I would like to go back to the last question real quick and ask you a correct question.
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay, so are with all of these elite running backs just playing out of their minds, are you more likely to take one in the first few rounds now, or are you still team wide receiver for 3 or 4 or 5 rounds?
You know, every time I stay away from receiver early on, I really struggle with feeling good about my roster later on. So I don't think it has anything to do with how these running backs are playing and or even how long they can play at that elite level for. More to me, it's just that I like my roster construction so much more when I invest heavily in receivers early and try to find the next guy to bump his way into that tier later on. So I think I'll continue to build my rosters the same way, but I have no problem with somebody who wants to build around one of these elite guys at the running back position. I'm guessing maybe you're willing if you're asking though.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how many of these guys would you take in the first round? Like, I feel like Hunt. I'm pretty close on Hunt, that I would kind of consider him in like the mid to late first, pretty easily. Fournette too, probably. Gurley is probably close to that too. Elliott for me is for sure, even with the suspension stuff. Bell is, again, I keep coming back to Bell as like the one guy that I might not, but yeah, I think I wouldn't mind, if my favorite receiver isn't there of that top tier, then I think I wouldn't have a problem, spending a pick on one of these really young guys.
And with that, let's move on to the wide receivers that really emerged in Week 7. I don't think you can talk about Week 7 wide receivers without starting with Amari Cooper, who blasted off on Thursday night against the Chiefs. 11 catches, 210 yards, those 2 touchdowns on 19 targets. That buying window slammed shut after going 13 catches for 84 yards and no touchdowns over the previous 5 weeks. Matt, I bought Amari Cooper a half hour before he caught his first pass.
Wow.
I got him for a first and second round pick in a dynasty.
Nice work.
It was probably luck more than anything that I got him. It was the only league I was able to get him during that slump, and I feel really good that I added him. I even had enough time to get him in my lineup, and I happened to be playing the guy who traded him to me. So that made it even sweeter, I guess.
Oh, man.
I needed a player to play that week, and it just all worked out. It fell into place. I saw some ridiculous trades, and without I won't mention the owner's name or anything like that. I feel like getting him for a first and second is a absolute steal, a bargain. There were some even worse ones than that, of owners being sick of Amari Cooper putting up those small stat lines. Now that he's had this big game, are you putting him in your lineup with confidence going forward?
To be honest with you, Dan, in leagues where I have him, I think I've benched him like once out of all of my leagues, and that was maybe 2 weeks ago. I've just been riding him and waiting because I knew it was coming. I wasn't able to buy a new share of him for a first and a second, but I did get him one new share of him for 2 firsts, so I still feel pretty good about that. Yeah, I'm still buying. I mean, you can't really buy now, I don't think. Yeah, it would be really difficult, I think, unless you just have a team that's like that, just an owner that really doesn't believe in him and is like, okay, I'm using this to go ahead and sell him really high now. I almost got another share of him from our buddy Dan Sanio when in a league where I'm a little bit of a rebuilder. I tried to move Julio for him and a little bit extra, and it didn't work out. Dan is too smart for that. But yeah, if you for some reason can find an owner that's selling, I certainly would still buy.
Yeah, he certainly looked good on Thursday night, and that's against a good defensive back that he did a lot of that work. And I would expect him to continue to bounce back going forward. Let's talk about a couple under the radar wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 types that emerged a little bit in Week 7. That's Ted Ginn and Kenny Stills, both of whom I was a big fan of in the offseason. You could get each of them for relatively cheap.
What you doing over there, Dan?
That's my ringtone, or that's my text message tone, and I muted the stupid thing, and it's going off twice while I'm talking now. I need one. Sorry, Aaron. Ted Ginn, 7 catches for 141 yards against the Packers. Kenny Stills, 6 catches for 85 yards and 2 scores in Week 7 as well. Each of these guys seem like that wide receiver 3 flex play with all these buys going on and things like that. What do you think of these guys? Are you putting them in your lineup? Are they guys you're targeting? Are they guys you're trying to sell because they're putting up numbers maybe above their head? What are you doing with these types of players, Matt?
I think for Stills, I'm probably not. I just feel like I don't trust that offense enough. With Ginn, I carried him for like the first 4 weeks and dropped him in a bunch of places once Steve got activated, and that didn't really work out because I started him before and he wasn't doing anything, and now that Steve is, of course, now that Snead is back, now he's starting to produce. I guess it's that hot seat thing, kind of like with Alex Smith and Pat Mahomes, right? When someone's coming for your job, like you're ready to start producing. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to be a guy who I would easily consider, especially as we're going through these bye week gauntlets here, is a guy plugging in as your last flex spot or whatever. So, in terms of buying or selling him, I don't think you can probably really sell him for anything. A third, probably both ways, buy or sell for a third, if you really wanted to try that. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at with them, about a third for both ways.
Yeah, like I said, I was a big fan of these guys. They were those wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 guys I was adding to my roster because when you need them, when the bye weeks hit, you've had a couple injuries, it feels like you can get lucky and stick them in the lineup, and maybe that's the game that they go off. You can also get that, low floor game where they catch one pass for 8 yards. So, it seems to me like with Stills, as long as Devontae Parker is out, he's going to be useful. Same thing might be true with Ginn. Willie Snead was inactive today against the Packers, so he got a lot more opportunities. We'll see what happens going forward, but they seem like they could be flex plays through these bye weeks to me.
And they could be, kind of matchup dependent plays. Like if you see it, you're playing a team where you think I really need a big week to win this week. Those are the kind of guys you plug in over, a guy who's going to get 5 for 50. You throw in Ked Ginn because he has a chance of going off for 2 touchdowns and a couple big scores. So I think those are the big situations when you want to play those guys.
Absolutely. Let's talk about tight ends for a moment here, Matt. Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I am finally a believer again, and I was back when he was drafted by the Buccaneers. I actually had the chance to listen to an interview that he did a few weeks ago on the internet, and he appeared recommitted to football. They talked to some of the coaching staff and a lot of the players on the Jets team, and everybody seems convinced. Now, a lot of that could be attributed before a breakout to just teammate talk and coach speak, but after 4 straight games with a touchdown, it appears to be real. He hasn't put up a big yardage game, but he is a huge red zone target for that Jets offense. Putting up low-end, tight end 1 numbers right now. If you're in a rebuild, Matt, are you buying him? And at the same time, if you're a contender and you need a tight end to fill because your guy isn't coming up big, are you buying him in that case too?
I think I'm probably more likely actually to buy as a contender than I am as a rebuild. I just have no idea what the Jets are doing or what they're going to, we came into the season, thought they were going to tank to try to get a quarterback, and now they're actually playing pretty well. So, I mean, I just don't know what their direction is right now. So we have no idea where ASJ is. If he's going to be there again next year, I don't even know what the contract is off the top of my head. I should probably know that, but I don't. So I think that I'm more likely to buy on a contender than a rebuild. I trust him right now, but I don't know if I trust him long-term, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and ASJ is a free agent next year, so we don't know where he'll be playing and who will be throwing in the ball.
And maybe it's a McCown thing too, So
it may be. You're right. I was going to mention that as well. Another tight end that had a big breakout game in Week 7 was O.J. Howard, 6 catches, 98 yards, and 2 touchdowns, where he was left all alone by that Bills defense. It was a breakout for him. Cameron Brate still got his 6 catches for 59 yards and more targets, 9 for Brate as compared to 6 for Howard. I think that buying window is closed for O.J. Howard, even in the off season, because people will be looking back to these couple nice games that Howard has had and see that upside. What do you think of Howard? Are you buying or selling on him, Matt?
I mean, I don't really know if you can buy, honestly. I mean, people have been waiting for this game, right? What is it with this guy and wide open touchdowns? It seems like all of his touchdowns in college were like this. Now he has another one here today. Brate is still a factor. I just don't think you're going to be able to buy him from, because I think teams that bought him this is the game they're waiting for, and they're like, oh yeah, this is why I bought him. So I do think he's probably startable in a pinch now going forward, whereas I don't think he was before. Really, I still think he's going to be probably pretty boom and bust with those other targets there on the offense, but. I don't think you can get a discount on him if that's what you're asking. I don't think a late first gets him at this point.
No, more than likely
mid first.
More than likely, an owner invested a late first to get him on their roster in the first place. So unless you're willing to give up more than that, you're not going to add him to your roster. I certainly think his owners are feeling a lot better after watching what he did in week 7 compared to earlier in the season. And it seems like that Tampa Bay coaching staff is going to make a little bit more of an effort to get Howard the ball going forward. That's it for our dynasty ups. Before we get to our dynasty downs, I want to talk to our listeners a little bit about Player Line. Our friends over at Player Line have a free fantasy sports app for Android and iOS that offers instant, real-time insights into every player in the NFL. All your fantasy news in one place. So if you haven't checked out Player Line, go grab your smartphone and do it right now. Let's get to these dynasty downs right now, Matt. Unless you have something to add.
The really exciting news about Player Line for us is our new partnership with them, and now that you can also aggregate DLF news into that same app. So that's really the big part of our partnership here that we're excited about.
Absolutely. Let's talk about these downs. First, Marcus Mariota at the quarterback position, 21 of 34, 203 yards against that Browns defense. Didn't throw a touchdown, also didn't throw a pick, but it's a pretty disappointing effort fantasy-wise for dynasty owners looking for that big game. He had an embarrassing missed touchdown pass at the goal line to Delaney Walker in the second half. The hamstring injury could be lingering here. Are you concerned about Mariota going forward, Matt?
I don't think so long term, but he has a tendency to get a little bit banged up throughout his career. He's that guy that he doesn't necessarily want to run. He's a pocket first quarterback, but he can run. And whenever he does run, it seems like he gets a little bit nicked up, and that does take away part of his attractiveness as a dynasty asset. But I still think he's probably a top 5 to 8 guy at worst, at the position. I don't think that I'm going to sell him after these recent games. I think you might be able to get a small discount on him, but I'm not really that worried, just because I think that the upside is immense. I just think he has to get it together, get his health together, and maybe recognize that, and maybe have the coaching staff manage his plays a little bit better.
Yeah, I think the only disagreement I'm going to have with you there, and you did say dynasty-wise, he's a number 5 to number 8 type of guy. As far as setting your lineup, it's really difficult for me to think he's a guy that you can just stick in your lineup. I certainly hope you have another option, a veteran guy that you can put in your lineup over him going forward, a Matthew Stafford, a Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Kirk Cousins even, one of those type of guys, Phillip Rivers maybe. I'm a little nervous about the short-term upside of Marcus Mariota going forward after that, especially after that horrible throw to Delaney Walker in the end zone. He was so open, and he just missed him horribly in week 7. A couple running backs that we should talk about. First, Tariq Cohen. He did not get a carry in week 7, despite the Bears being up big early. Had 1 catch for 70 yards, but also dropped a couple of balls. Chicago wasn't forced to put the ball in the air all that much. In fact, quarterback Mitchell Trubisky only attempted 7 passes in the entire game, which dynasty owners should look at as a reason not to put him in your lineup, even in 2 quarterback leagues. Feels a lot like Jared Goff to me from a year ago. That coaching staff does not want him throwing the ball. With Cohen, though, is he even startable not right now going forward? It seems like if you're rebuilding, maybe you should be buying, but what's the price in that case? And again, are you starting him, Matt, going forward?
I'm not starting him. I had an opportunity to buy him early on, sending I think it was Olsen for him, and I passed. And that didn't work out the following week when Olsen decided to get hurt, and I was really sad for a minute. But the last few weeks have really showed us that I don't really think the coaching staff knows how to use them. Like the first couple of weeks, what happened to that usage? Maybe it was just because Howard was a little dinged up to start the season. Maybe that's why they used him as an increased role. But I really think he's the best receiving option they have on that team, except for maybe the tight ends, if you want to argue Zach Miller maybe. But I just don't get why they're not throwing the ball to him more. It doesn't make any sense to me. Every time he touches the ball, he shows what he can do. It's just, I don't know. I think it's John Fox. I think that's what it is.
I really think so, too. It's John Fox. And if he was in a situation with a coaching staff that knew how to use a player of his talents, for example, if he was in the Alvin Kamara role in New Orleans, he'd be putting up those Alvin Kamara numbers. So we'll see how that changes going forward. I might buy him if the owner was like, oh, I should have sold him while I could get something for him. I need to get whatever I can, and you can get him for a late second or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. But if that opportunity presented itself or something along those lines, I would certainly jump at it still. Derrick Henry was also a little bit disappointing in week 7, 13 carries, just 13 yards, even with DeMarco Murray nursing a hamstring. Henry didn't convert a goal line opportunity on 4th down that he had. He's been under 25 total yards in 4 of 7 games this season. I'm a little bit leery about Henry going forward. I know those opportunities are going to come down the road when Murray is on the depth chart anymore. If you're in a rebuild, Matt, are you targeting Derrick Henry for 2018 and beyond?
I actually am, and I have not been a giant Derrick Henry fan, but I did last week actually on a contender. I moved Le'Veon Bell for Henry, Ingram, and a second. So I am targeting him if I think that if I believe in the talent and I think that I'm going to compete next season. Again, it's always reliant if I think I'm going to compete one season from now, I think. But yeah, I think he's a great talent. I think I was wrong on him coming out. I think a lot of people thought that he didn't have a whole lot of shiftiness. He can't catch the ball, those kind of things. He's just a big back. So this game was pretty disappointing. We did think that he was going to have a bigger game than he did, but I don't think that really affects his long-term value much. I think there's some weird things going on with that offense right now. They're missing Corey Davis still, which, is another disappointment we could talk about, honestly, that he's still not on the field, and Mariota is dinged up. So I just think once that offense finally comes together, that he's going to be an asset that we want.
So if an owner was looking for a first-round pick type player, or let's say in a deal that you're about to do, they say you can either take my mid to late first-round pick or Derrick Henry. You're taking Henry?
I think so. I think I would, yeah.
Okay, so that's where his value lies in your eyes. I think it's a little bit more questionable for me. And like I said, I'm just a little bit leery of him. He's not putting up that, with the exception of that one big run, and I know that still counts and everything on that Thursday night game, on a Monday night game. I just haven't seen it from Henry all year. And Murray, with that same offensive line, has been able to put out the production, at least in spurts. Let's talk about Joe Mixon a little bit. Just 7 carries, 48 yards this week against Pittsburgh, 3 catches for 20 yards as well. The last 3 games before his Week 7 contest against the Steelers, 21 touches, and 15 touches, just 10 this week. He's still sharing the touches with Hill and Bernard. I'm a huge Joe Mixon believer. I'll be a truther until he's not in the league, I believe. It's hard to do with that offensive line because that offensive line can't make anybody look good, with the exception of the opposition's defense. I really feel like he's an excellent trade target for those rebuilding if Mixon happens to be on a contending roster, because he's really hard to get in a starting lineup. What are your thoughts on the rookie out of Oklahoma, Matt?
Man, I just thought coming out of the bye week, we were going to really see the coaching staff commit to him and just, hey, figure this out. You got a whole week now. Figure out how to get him installed in the base offense and keep him in there. And it just, I don't know. It just didn't happen. I really don't get it. I think that he and Bernard are probably the future, that they're probably going to move on from Hill, but who knows? Hill's still getting carries too. So I agree with you. I definitely would buy if I'm a rebuilder. However, I do have him on a few contending teams, and I'm not really interested in selling him, honestly, and for what I think I could get for him right now. I got an offer from like ASJ and Doug Martin, something like that. Both guys who we mentioned, I do want to buy, but I just don't think that's quite enough for a guy that is as talented as I think Mixon is. So I think I'm holding unless I'm a rebuilder and can somehow pry him off of a contending team.
So on any of those rosters, Matt, is Mixon a weekly starter for you? Somebody you're relying on?
I wouldn't call him a weekly starter, but he's definitely in like the rotation through these bye weeks. I started him today, for instance.
Sure. If an owner offered you Mark Ingram, who you said you're very interested in, you want, you're a contender, are you doing that swap?
If I need a running back, I think absolutely, and that kind of hurts a little bit. It kind of hurts a little bit, but I think I would. I think Ingram, is going to be more productive the rest of the season for sure. So if I think I have a chance to win it all this year, then that seems like a fair swap to me.
Yeah, that's. I knew I'd get you to at least raise an eyebrow on that.
As soon as you said it, it hurt a little bit. Like my heart just. Wait, am I really going to do that? But I think I will.
No, I have to do this deal. Oh no. All right, let's talk about another guy you have been known to love on this program. Melvin Gordon, just 17 carries, or not just 17 carries, but just 37 yards on those 17 carries. Also only one catch for 6 yards. Another down game in what has been a major roller coaster for Gordon. Very up and down, but it seems to me, and I'm a Gordon guy as well, it seems to me that dynasty owners should just continue to expect this going forward as the season progresses. There's been some injuries. There's other mouths to be fed in that offense, although not in that backfield necessarily. Matt, do you have anything to add other than what you have every week for the last 6?
No, I still think he's an every week play just based on volume. I think he ran into a really tough defense this week. Again, referring back to 4-for-4 schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Denver is the 3rd best defense against the run this year. So I wasn't surprised to see a bit of a down week this year. It would have been nice to see him, get a goal line touchdown or whatever. But the passing game was working. That we used to be really afraid of the passing defense for Denver, but with Aqib Talib and Chris Harris and those guys, it's just not happening for them this year. And teams are being able to move the ball through the air, and it wasn't anything different today with Phillip Rivers. So I just think that was it was mostly a product of that. I'm still a Gordon fan. I'm not giving up on you, buddy.
Yeah, I am too. That defense did give up 117 yards to Orleans Darkwa a week earlier, however, so keep that in mind. Not trying to throw any cold water on anything. Speaking of the Broncos, C.J. Anderson, another disappointing week. 10 carries, 44 yards. He's splitting time with Jamal Charles. It's that offensive line is ugly. They struggled even against one of the worst run defenses in the league in the Chargers. Are you worried about Anderson? Because I was really high on Anderson 4 or 5 weeks ago, thinking we might have an RB1 rejuvenation back on our hands. I am not so sure going forward, Matt.
Yeah, I'm not either. I've always been an Anderson fan and kind of thought he was undervalued, but I just don't think it's there with this offense. I think that week 2 they played Dallas and they put up a ton of points, and Simeon looked like the second coming. I think that we know that was an anomaly now, and really what this offense is the one that's going to do what it's done the last 4 weeks, which was put up 16, 16, 10, and 0 points today, right? So I think the whole offense is kind of broken right now, and they need to fix that before Anderson can really be productive for us. He's not the kind of back that I think that can carry an offense, and he needs that really good offense around him. So it's tough with him.
Yeah, he needs a good offense. He needs a good offensive line, and he can certainly get what's blocked and turn a 5-yard run into a 10 or 15 or 20-yard run from time to time. But he needs some help from that passing game, and Trevor Siemian is part of the problem, not the answer, it seems to me, in Denver. Another part of the problem for dynasty owners going forward is that Packers passing game. Jordy Nelson had 1 catch. Devontae Adams, just 2 catches. Brett Hundley, he struggled, to put it nicely, I guess, in his first start of his career. 12 of 25, 87 yards, and an interception. Did have a rushing touchdown, but that didn't help those receivers, Matt. Cobb, Bennett, Montgomery, they were all useless in fantasy as well. What are you expecting as a dynasty owner going forward from this passing attack in Green Bay?
Well, it's certainly disappointing. I do think we need to give the Saints a little bit of credit here. I think that they've played really well on defense for the past 3 weeks, and I don't think we can just say that that's the defense we're going to play everybody against like we have for the last several years. So I think that's part of it. And, it's Hundley's second game. I'm willing to give him, I think, after the bye week. If they can't get him straight after the bye week, really install some offensive plays specifically for him, do things that he's comfortable with doing, and he comes out and struggles again in week 9, then I think we have to be worried. But right now, I think we just need to, do what Aaron Rodgers does and just relax a little bit.
Nice. I don't feel quite as rosy colored glasses as you. I was really disappointed. I was one of the guys saying the same thing that you heard everywhere. Hundley needs a week of preparation. Of course, that coaching staff, Mike McCarthy, was saying it's our best week of practice. All that stuff. I was all in on it, and Hundley did not look good to me. They tried to roll him out of the pocket, give him some easy throws, and that Saints defense took that all away. He couldn't push the ball down the field. He had Jordy had a step on the defensive back a couple of times and couldn't throw it out there far enough. I am leery. I think expectations need to change for dynasty owners. Jordy Nelson is obviously not a wide receiver 1 going forward. He should be bumped down to the expectations of a wide receiver 2 at best. Adams goes from a wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 3, and I'm not even sure if I'm willing to put Cobb, Bennett, or Montgomery or any other pass catcher in a lineup until we see anything better from Brett Hundley going forward. Another passing attack that it has a down arrow next to it for sure, partially because of injury again for a quarterback, is in the desert. Carson Palmer broke his arm in week 7 against the Rams. Larry Fitzgerald, 3 catches, John Brown 1, J.J. Nelson 2, Jerron Brown 2. They spread it out evenly, but it wasn't a good evenly in Arizona for Drew Stanton after he came in. Is there any reason for optimism as a dynasty owner starting any Arizona wide receiver going forward, Matt?
I'm going to say yes with a caveat, and that is this is going to sound weird, but I really think that they need to get Blaine Gabbert in there. Drew Stanton is not the guy, and I know you just laughed, you just rolled your eyes a little bit. I know, but Blaine Gabbert in stretches has played really well last season for the Niners, earlier this preseason for the Cardinals. So I think he is going to give them a better chance to win if they can. If Arians decides that's the case, but Stanton has been Arians' boy basically his entire career. I think he's the only reason why Stanton is still in the league, I think. So, I think it's dependent on that. With Stanton there, it's really tough. I think it's going to be really hard to bench a guy like Fitzgerald. The other 3 options, though, I think are pretty easy to go ahead and keep on your bench for a while.
Yeah, no, I didn't laugh because you said that name. I laughed more because I did not expect that to be the caveat that you threw out there. And that's the first time I heard that. So kudos to you, I guess, my friend. I think there is some point. There is a point to that for sure. Stanton didn't look good. If Hundley looked bad, Stanton looked horrible in his work in week 7.
Yeah, and Gabbert's a pretty an underrated mobile kind of guy. Like right. He can run around. That offensive line is not doing well, so I think he gives him a better chance to do it. Whether it's to roll out and chuck it deep to one of the speedsters on the outside, or just to be able to get away from a rush and be able to dump it off to Fitzgerald or Ellington or. So I think there's a chance. I think.
A big name receiver that had another letdown this week is T.Y. Hilton, 2 catches for 27 yards on 8 targets. Jacksonville's defense shut down that Colts passing game in week 7. 3 catches for 46 yards over the last couple of games for Hilton. Are you buying or selling in general on Hilton, or just waiting for luck to get back?
I think I'm definitely not going to sell him at this point. I think we know how good of a receiver Hilton can be. Showed it last year when he led the league in receiving yards, and it's just tough with Brissett. You don't know what you're going to get. The defense that they played today is probably the best pass defense in the league, honestly, until I think it was Goff last week was the first quarterback of the season to score more than 6.5 fantasy points against them. So they're just a really good defense, and I'm not really surprised that they struggled today. Usually we get something from Hilton on that fast track in Indy, but it just wasn't there today. That defense is just too good. So I'm definitely still buying if he's available for a discount, and I'm not going to sell him for a discount. That's for sure.
I saw an interesting trade this week that included Hilton, who was the wide receiver 13 in the most recent DLF ADP. He went straight up for Corey Davis, wide receiver 15, and I thought that was an interesting one. That rebuild wanted Davis. The contender wanted Hilton, and I'm not sure if that's going to help him as much this year, although long-term it may. Let's move on to our third segment, probably the most interesting one for the two of us at least. Let's talk contenders and players that we're targeting by position, Matt. We'll start with quarterbacks, and I'll go first. I think the most obvious guy in the world for a contender, particularly if you were relying on one of these quarterbacks that have gone down over the last couple of weeks, is Alex Smith. It's very realistic that Smith could be on a team that isn't contending this year. And he can help fill that void. Josh McCown's another guy I've been targeting in Superflex leagues where I lost Aaron Rodgers. I think both guys can help out in the short term. Alex Smith obviously has a lot more long-term value as well, although we don't know where he's going to be or who he's going to be throwing passes to in the future. Matt, who are your guys that you're buying if you're a contender at the quarterback position?
I think you're spot on. I think Alex Smith was my guy, and you not that you stole him, but he was the one that I wanted to say for sure. I think he is definitely the most attractive guy buy right now for a contender, especially if it's in like a one quarterback league. You know, I think you can get him for basically nothing, despite how good he's looked this season. I think that he's still probably, in the eyes of dynasty owners, doesn't have a whole lot of long-term value, but for this season, he's good.
And if I could add to that real quickly, using the trade tool, Alex Smith has gone in one quarterback leagues for a second-round pick and a third-round pick in the last few days. So you're right. He does go for almost nothing, and you're getting quarterback one numbers out of the quarterback from Kansas City.
Yeah, I feel like you can buy, you know, most quarterbacks outside of maybe the top 5 to 8 for about a second-round pick, you know, in a one quarterback league. So I think he's probably top of the list there. Some other kind of I'm not under the radar probably, but some other guys that I thought would be interesting, probably both for a contender and a rebuilder, honestly, is the first guy is our buddy Teddy Two Gloves Bridgewater. You know, he's going to start practicing here pretty soon. You know, what a story it would be if he could come back and go full circle with Sam Bradford here. You know, that team is playing really well. The Super Bowl is in Minnesota this year. What a story would it be if Teddy could come back and lead that team to at least the playoffs, if not the Super Bowl. So I think he's a little bit underrated of a buy right now. You can probably, again, in a one quarterback league, you can probably get him for a third rounder, honestly. You might have a team that has just held on for the last 2 years and is just done with him once they get him off their roster. So he's a guy. And as we talked about earlier, Hundley, I think there is still a little bit of room for optimism. That hurts a little bit to say. But like I said, I'm willing to give him another game after the bye. So if you can get him after this week, after he disappointed a little bit, I think he's worth a shot.
How about the running back position? What running backs are you targeting if you're a
Doug Martin, baby? Like, I think he's running really well. That Tampa Bay team is not really playing up to their talent right now, but I think that he is unquestioned, you know, lead back in that offense right now. And I think that's some cheap production at the position. We talked about LaShawn McCoy, and then the last guy I'll throw out is Dion Lewis. I think he's really emerged as a big part of that offense. You know, I guess it muddies a little bit back with Burkhead coming back this week. So I guess we'll see what happens there. And I keep getting sucked back into this New England running back group. But I really think with the increased usage for Lewis over the last few weeks that he's going to continue to be a part of it.
One guy that's a sneaky contender target, I had Mark Ingram on this list, but we'll avoid him since we talked about him at length earlier in the program. But the sneaky guy for me is Carlos Hyde. I think he has short-term value to a contender while he's with the 49ers because they simply don't have a lot of other talent on that offense, and he's going to get goal line touches. Even though he's had some down games, he's going to continue to get the ball, it feels like to me. It can help a contender. Plus, he might end up somewhere that makes him very valuable a year from now. The last name I'll add, a lot like you with Dion Lewis, LeGarrette Blount, you can get him very, very cheap. He's the goal line guy in Philadelphia. That's a good offense. He'll continue to get touches, and it seems like you can get him so cheap that he's sure to outperform the cost of adding him to a contending roster. At the wide receiver position, a couple guys I've been targeting and a couple guys I've been able to get in a few leagues, Adam Thielen and Danny Amendola. Amendola I bought for a third-round pick in 2 separate leagues, starting him in Week 7 this week. And Thielen, I don't understand why people don't wake up to Adam Thielen. He's still relatively cheap compared to his production. I know a lot of people are opening their eyes to him. He's a nice target if you're looking for that, especially if you have a true contender and you're looking for that wide receiver 3. You're going to trade a late draft pick for him or a young player that you're not using right now and need that guy to fill in and be a starter for the rest of the year. Thielen is a guy that I'm willing to add. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, Thielen is. I think it's really that UDFA tag, man. Like people just can't get over the fact that once they've produced in the NFL, that doesn't matter anymore. So I think that's what's holding a lot of people back so far. But I love Thielen. I think that's a great ad. My guys are Chris Hogan and Garcon. Both guys I still think you can get relatively cheaply. I would buy, if I was a contender, I would still buy Hogan for a late first, early second range. And I think Garcon you can probably get, you know, maybe even like an early third, honestly, at this point, because I don't think most people think he has a whole lot of value after this season. So late second, early third, I bet you could get him for.
Yeah, a lot of those guys are in the same conversation. It's interesting to me that you'd say Hogan is a late first. That's probably on the high end of most people's opinion of him going forward.
I guess so. He's outproducing Cooks. I mean, he's outproducing Cooks before that rib injury last week, which he's going to play through tonight, which I'm excited to see. I want to start everybody in this game, honestly. But I just think that he is the true wide receiver one in that offense. I think he's going to be the most consistent producer in that passing game outside of Gronk.
Yeah, I bought Amendola really cheap. Third round in both of the trades I was able to do, and I'd much rather have Amendola for a third than Hogan for a first.
That's fair.
To be honest. Let's quickly do the tight ends. Jason Witten for me, for obvious reasons. If you're a contender and you need a guy to fill that spot, he's going to get the targets. He's going to catch the ball. He might not catch a lot of touchdowns, although he caught one in week 7. Who are your tight ends that you're targeting, Matt, as a contender?
The previously mentioned ASJ, I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins, I think, is a good buy for this season for a contender. And I think Tyler Kroft is, I mean, he didn't do a whole lot today, unfortunately, but, I think he's a starting tight end for as long as Eifert is out for the rest of the season. So I think you could do worse there. And I bet you could basically get him for a third, maybe even like a 4th rounder, honestly. So two cheap guys there.
You mentioned Eifert there. He's one of the top sells for me. I'm just waiting for him to get back so I can get him off of my roster, to be honest with you. Let's move quickly to the rebuild aspect of the buys. Talk about the quarterbacks a little bit. This is a pretty obvious one. If I'm in a rebuild, and whether it's 1 quarterback, super flex, 2 quarterbacks, size of league doesn't matter. The guy I'm looking at to try to add to my roster is Aaron Rodgers for obvious reasons. Perhaps the owner is contender that's worried and needs to add points to his roster. I'm giving up whatever it takes in reason, of course, to add Rodgers to my roster. I have a feeling you're going the same way, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Rodgers is a buy for me. Another guy, if you want to go from that elite tier, is Luck. There's a chance now that it looks like he may not even play this year at all, which, if you're a contender, been holding hope for him to come in and save you. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, they might be willing to move Luck at this point. And then a really deep guy that I'm going to throw out because the Denver offense just looks so bad. I don't believe in Paxton Lynch. I feel like if he was going to do it, he would have showed something by now. I just don't think his head's in the game. Too much Xbox for Paxton Lynch. But Chad Kelly next year, I think, is going to be in the mix to compete for that starting job. It's certainly possible they add another veteran in the offseason, but I loved Kelly's talent, and I think he's going to be right there in the mix next season.
Yeah, and that coaching staff has shown with Simeon that they're willing to look past where a player was drafted or how they were looked at when they were coming into the league and give an opportunity to otherwise overlooked quarterback prospect for sure. Let's keep it in the backfield with running backs we'd like to add as a rebuild. He'd probably be pretty expensive because a lot of guys are looking at putting Tevin Coleman in their lineups, but he's the guy I would probably be targeting if I'm looking at a rebuild, and especially if I'm looking at more than next year out. He's signed through 2018, so he'll be a free agent after next season, and it seems like he's in the shadows of Devonta Freeman. And waiting for an opportunity to get out of it. If you ask me, I'm waiting for him to get that chance to be a true number 1 tailback. I think he's made for that role, and he's just not going to get it in Atlanta. So if I'm in a rebuild and the price is right, Coleman's the guy I'm looking at. Who are you looking at, Matt?
I just think you're going to have to wait forever. I mean, what happens if they re-sign him? Then you're just...
Yeah, you run the risk of that for sure. Yeah. And the price is just... It's relatively high considering his role. He's still getting 8 to 10 touches a game, 8 to 12 touches a game. So he's useful to, even contenders that need that 4th or 5th running back on their roster.
I think there are just Coleman groupies, like people that just love him unabashedly and are willing to keep him unless you're going to pay an exorbitant amount. But my guy, the first one is pretty obvious, I think, because of injuries, is Dalvin Cook. Of course, I think if a contender needs a piece and is willing to move a guy like Cook, he's a guy I would buy. And then we talked about Aaron Jones earlier. I think he's a good buy right now as well, even coming off of 2 nice games.
Yeah, it seems like Jones is, like we said earlier, going to cost you a 1st-round pick or the equivalent. That might not be a bad investment, though, from what we've seen from the rookie out of UTEP for sure. How about wide receiver, Matt? Who are you looking at in a rebuild at trying to add to your roster yet this year?
I got 2 guys who were kind of in the same draft range area in startups this offseason. That's Tyrell Williams and Cam Meredith. I know Tyrell is disappointed a little bit this season, especially later now that Hunter Henry has kind of come on and kind of assumed a bigger role in that passing offense. But he's still a guy I like. He's got such incredible measurables, 6'4", 205, fast as all get out. So even if it's not with the Chargers this year or next season, his contract is up. I think he could be a really productive member somewhere. And then we've seen that this Bears passing offense just has nothing. It just really has nothing in the receiving game. So that says to me that Meredith is going to come back and be a part of that next season. Even if they do go out and draft a guy in the draft, I still think Meredith is going to be a big part of it. So he's another guy I look at.
The guys for me are Josh Doxson, and I've been a Doxson truther from the beginning. I'm a big fan of him, and I still believe the breakout's coming. I think it's coming very, very soon. In fact, if you're listening to this podcast on Monday before Monday Night Football, it might come tonight. So if you're willing to send out an offer, now is the time to do it. The other guy for me is Juju Smith-Schuster. I love that guy. I think the Steelers coaching staff is in love with that guy as well. He hasn't had huge games, but he's been involved. And if he didn't have those other receivers there, Martavis Bryant and even Eli Radgers saw the field a little bit in week 7, Antonio Brown's obviously going to get all those looks. Jesse James is part of the offense, or excuse me, Vance McDonald actually is a bigger part of the offense as a pass catcher as well. Smith-Schuster is just waiting for his chance. It might not come till his sophomore season in Pittsburgh, but he is the number one target for me. Probably real close to Josh, along with Josh Doxson. Those are the guys I'm looking at adding, whether I'm a contender or in a rebuild. No matter where I am in the standings, I want those guys on my team. The guy at tight end that I want on my team is Jonnu Smith from Tennessee. The price hasn't gotten out of control, although there was an injury today to
Delaney Walker.
There was an injury today to Delaney Walker, so his role is expected most likely to increase if that's a long-term injury to Walker. Smith has that rare skill, or maybe not quite as rare anymore, but that skill to stretch the seam, to get down the field. I think he can be a target in that offense for Marcus Mariota. He'll fit very, very well into it, and we're just waiting for a breakout on him as well. So if you can add Smith as a rebuilder, it certainly could be advantageous for you down the stretch. Who are your tight ends, Matt?
This is going to be a buy high, but give me Evan Ingram all day. I don't really even care
Matt,
what it.
I have to stop you. You can't trade him to yourself. You already have him on every team. Right?
I do. It's true. And I was going to say that I'm at the point with Ingram now where, honestly, if I'm on a rebuild with no shot this year, I am okay dealing Ingram straight up for Gronk. Like, that's how strongly I feel about him this year. I think he's going to be a focal point of that offense for years to come, and I'm in love with him. Some deeper guys that probably most people have forgotten about by this time. Rico Gathers in Dallas. Witten's going to go away at some point. He just is. Although he had an incredible one-handed catch today for a touchdown from Dak Prescott. So he's one guy, and then Eric Swoop in Indianapolis. It's clear that role is going to be fruitful going forward. Jack Doyle is a nice piece, but he doesn't offer the athletic upside of Eric Swoop, and you can get those guys for basically free, I think. So some deeper guys there.
Ingram is not free. He's extremely expensive.
Ingram is very expensive.
He's going to cost you multiple first-round picks.
Multiple, you think?
Oh, yeah, I think so. You're not getting him for a mid-first, I don't think. You think you could?
Maybe not. Maybe I'm being. I just don't ever. I don't think I ever see any tight ends get sold for multiple firsts. Is my maybe in like a tight end or something? Does he go for multiple firsts? See, I think if I had an early first, I think that could get Gronk. I think even now, but maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong.
Wow, that's maybe I spoke to.
I got Gronk for one mid first this past offseason, but maybe things have changed now that he's shown he's healthy again. I don't know.
Yeah, I should probably send out some offers because I'd gladly throw out a mid-first for Ingram at this point in the leagues that I don't have him.
Yeah.
For sure. That's going to do it for this episode, the Week 7 edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I encourage you to follow the podcast at DLF Podcast on Twitter. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think of the pod, the format, what we talk about, and when the podcast is released. We try to get it out every Sunday night throughout the season, so you have it to listen to on your commute or at work on Monday. You should also follow my buddy Matt. He's at MPricer. I'm at DMyler22 on Twitter as well. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again next week on the DLF Dynasty Podcast.